What's going on, kids? Today we're going to take a look at replacing a starter motor. We're going to look at it from the side of a technician. So where do we go on to Identifix to try and find the information about where our starter is, how do we actually replace it, where are the bolts? And we're also going to take a look at it from a consumer side as well. If your starter has failed, how much should you pay somebody to replace it? How much does the starter motor cost from the dealership? How many hours of labor are you going to be paying for this job? And that also applies to the technician side. So if you are a tech, how much should you charge for this job? So I've got a starter motor here, and most of them look kind of like this. You've got a starter solenoid on the back side, and this is just a giant switch. It's going to take a little bit of electricity from right here when we turn our key to the on position. The car's computer sends a signal to this wire, that tells it to start, sends a little 12-volt signal here, and then another wire from your car's battery, straight from battery positive, goes on to this lead, and then it connects and closes a switch that's inside here, this solenoid, and that sends the power into this, and then out, down this, and then down this copper wire here into our giant starter motor, this bit. Once this motor starts spinning, this gear is going to start rotating and then also shoot out. It's spring-loaded. So as it spins, it's going to pop out of here, and that's going to engage the ring gear on our flywheel or our flex plate, depending if we have an automatic transmission or a manual transmission. We'll go more into that type of stuff in the next video when we actually break one of these things down and fire it up on a bench so you can see that thing spin and see that the gear pop out. But today we're just going to look at kind of where these parts are at and where to find the information on how to do the job. So our first stop was Identifix, and I'm going to use a 1999 Miata, the 10th anniversary version of the car, because I don't know why not. And this particular vehicle is also the one that was modeled for the wrench game. So when we're done looking up kind of where to find these things in Identifix, we're going to be able to use that information and go look at this car in wrench and see where the actual physical location of the starter motor is on this car. So we'll start out by just searching 1999 Mazda Miata, and we'll grab the 10th anniversary edition. And this is where Identifix kind of starts to get intimidating, right? There are a whole bunch of different things for us to click on here. We'll go to this motor parts and labor one first, this tab right here, because this is what's going to tell us kind of what we're in for. How hard is this job going to be to do? How long is it going to take to do it? How long is it going to take to replace it? So we can come down here to the starter, and we'll click on that. And it's going to give us a huge list of different things. So we'll, again, click on starter, and then we're going to click on all. So this is how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take to perform a whole host of different jobs on the starter. So this is what we should charge, a half hour's worth of time in order to inspect the wiring to our starter. But really what we want to look at is this starter R&R. So this is removal and replacement. So we're going to remove the old starter and we're going to put a new one in after we test it. So we test it for a half hour and then we remove and replace the old one, and that's going to take us 1.2 hours. So if you were to go into a shop somewhere, you should expect to pay anywhere from a half hour to an hour of diagnostic fee. And then once the starter has been confirmed to be the issue, you should expect to pay about 1.2 hours worth of labor at anywhere from $80 up to $180, depending on what that shop charges per hour. And then if we come down here, these are the factory part numbers and the MSRP, the manufacturer's suggested retail price for all of the components that are in a starter. So if you were just trying to rebuild it and you were looking for individual parts, these are the part numbers for all of those bits and pieces. But in reality, most of the time, if you can just go to the part store, or if you can go to the dealership and just grab the part, it's probably going to be, the whole starter motor. You're going to replace the whole lump. And here's our part number. We should expect to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $270 for that starter motor if we were at the dealership. But we can always do a quick little search here and see what this would cost online. We can get a used one here, so you can roll the dice if you want to. For $35, that's terrifying. Or you can get some newer ones here for anywhere from $180 all the way up to that manufactured retail price of about $250. So you can search this way. You can go into Napa and give them the part number. They can cross-search that, and then they'll give you kind of their version. Or honestly, if you just go into Napa and tell them you need a starter for a 99 Miata with a 1.8, they'll be able to give you what you need. Here's an exploded view of all of these different parts. If you replace them, all numbered, so you can kind of compare that to another chart with all the pieces. But really what we know now is that if our starter goes bad, we should expect to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $250 for the part, and then somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 or 3 hours worth of labor. So really, $400 to $500 after taxes and shop fees, because you got to pay for shop towels and soap and things, and shop's got to keep its lights on. So this is somewhere in the neighborhood of a $400 to $500 job if you were to bring your vehicle in someplace. An hour's labor isn't too bad. On this particular car, the starter motor is on the top under the intake manifold and always in between the motor and transmission, which we'll talk about when we get into wrench. But let's take a look at the instructions on how to remove the starter. So we'll go back to our main home page here, and there are a ton of different ways to get to this same location, but I'm just going to type starter motor into my search. Starter motor. There we go. And then on the right, we are going to get repair. So this is where I'm going to find the instructions on how to repair the starter motor. And then I'm given disassembly and assembly of the actual starter motor itself. I don't want that. I'm just going to replace the whole lump. So I want starter motor removal and installation. And then I get a diagram. And this tells me that here's my starter motor, and I can see the different wiring that's on there. I can pop this out. I can see the wiring that goes into it. Here's my battery positive wire, number 1, battery wire. And then I've got my signal wire, number 2, the terminal S. That's my signal wire that tells the starter to turn on. And then there's the link coming down to the motor itself, and then the actual gear sticks out. The important part about these exploded diagrams is when I look at this, I'm going to go into, we're going to go look at a car, but we're going to go into wrench here in a second. And the important thing here is now I can see which direction these bolts come in from. So this is the plate between my motor and my transmission, which is probably the transmission. But when the starter slots into there, now I know that I'm going to have a bolt coming through from this side that goes into a nut, and then on the top I'm going to have 2 more bolts, and they're going to come in from the opposite side that the starter motor is on. So those are going to look like bell housing bolts coming through your transmission. Again, I will show you this in wrench, and it'll make a little bit more sense when we compare the diagram to what we're actually seeing in the game. So this lets you know kind of where your approach should be, and there's step-by-step instructions. Sometimes they're better than others. This one doesn't really have a whole bunch of diagrams to tell you where the starter motor is at, but we can scroll down to component locations, and it'll tell us kind of where all of those things are at. So we can go back to locations. So we click component locations, and then it's going to give us some wiring diagrams here. And once we open it up, we need to scroll down. So this is the actual written roadmap of where all of the wiring goes in your car. I know this is intimidating. I know this is confusing. Once we kind of get down this road and start doing these wiring diagrams, this will all make sense to you. This is your ignition switch. This is where your key goes, and then there's some other components. This is what your starter itself. These are all the connectors that make your starter work. But if we scroll down a little bit further, we've got kind of a map of the car and where these locations are at. So under the hood, we can see our starter motor is part A-01, and if we follow these lines up, this lets us know that the starter motor is going to be on the passenger side in between the engine and the transmission. That's where your starter is going to be, because that's where the ring gear is on, like I said earlier, either your flex plate or your flywheel, depending if it's an automatic or manual transmission. So that starter motor is going to be right there in between. And this kind of gives us a place to start looking. So let's jump over into wrench and see if it's actually where it's supposed to be. So here's our wrench game, and these are our two Miatas. We've got an engine stand over there. And so let's walk up to our car, and again, the location of the starter should be somewhere on the passenger side of the vehicle, and then down here in the back, right where our engine meets our trans. So we'll crouch down, and there it is, right where it should be. And you can see the game is a little bit off, right, because this bolt should be going the other direction according to our manual, but we still have our 3 bolts just like it said, and we can remove these. And here's our starter solenoid up top. We have the starter motor down here on the bottom, and you can see the rendering is correct of a through hole. So the bolt should actually be going from this direction like it says in the service manual. The rendering is correct. And then we can remove this thing, and we can see, I'll just drop it on the ground. We can then see inside the motor or inside the bell housing, this is that ring gear that the teeth shoot out into. This will shoot out forward as it spins, grab onto this, and then turn our motor over for us. So all that stuff is right where it should be. In the next video, we're going to actually kind of fire one of these things up and go pull this off of one of the cars that are out there in the shop using our service information. So if you have any questions, as always, feel free to shoot me an email. Otherwise, be good, and I will see you next time.